If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars. Milky Way. They didn't cross the border by accident. They crossed it because they didn't believe the warnings. Every map marked the region the same way. No trade routes, no rescue lanes, no return vectors. Just a scar in space, labeled in quiet fear. Human space. Civilizations older than stars avoided it. Empires with weapons that bent suns went around it. And yet, the expedition still launched. Because curiosity is louder than caution. The Carthel Ascendancy had conquered 12 systems without losing a single flagship. Their admirals believed the stories were exaggerations, primitive myths created by weaker species to explain disappearances they didn't understand. Physics didn't break. Space didn't fight back. Those were excuses. So when their long-range sensors detected distortions along the border, gravity twisting like muscle under strain, they leaned in closer instead of pulling away. That was the first mistake. The moment their lead vessel crossed the threshold, every instrument screamed. Not alarms, contradictions. Distance stopped agreeing with itself. Time lagged, then jumped. Stars ahead appeared older than the ones behind. The crew felt it in their bones, a pressure like the universe inhaling. Still, no enemy appeared. No fleets. No mines. No defenses. Just silence. The admirals relaxed. Smug smiles rippled through the command decks. See, they said. Empty. Abandoned. Another dead civilization that couldn't survive its own cradle. Then they saw it. A structure, massive, angular, unmistakably artificial, drifting at the system's edge. Not a station. Not a ship. Something in between. Scarred. Ancient. Covered in layered plating that didn't reflect light so much as absorb it. And carved into its hull, in 100 languages, was the same message. Turn back. Some of the glyphs were burned. Some were scratched by claws. Some were etched with tools too advanced to name. The Ascendancy laughed. Warnings, they decided, were the last defense of the weak. They sent a probe toward the structure. It vanished halfway there. Not exploded, not destroyed. Just gone. As if space itself had closed its hand around it. That was when the human transmission began. Not a threat. Not a plea. A calm, measured voice, layered with static and something older than fear. Foreign vessel, it said. You are entering a restricted existential zone. We recommend immediate withdrawal. The admirals prepared a response. They never sent it. Because behind the structure, space began to move. And something massive was waking up. The stars didn't shift. They flinched. That was the only way the Ascendancy's scientists could describe it. As if distant suns recoiled from something unseen, their light bending away from the region behind the human structure. Sensors tried to compensate. Failed. Rebooted. Failed again. Then mass readings spiked. Not ships. Not fleets. Something bigger. The admirals demanded visuals. The tactical screens zoomed in, enhancing contrast, forcing definition where none wanted to exist. Space behind the structure folded inward, like a curtain pulled by invisible hands. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, an outline emerged. A human vessel. At least, that's what the database insisted. But this wasn't the sleek, elegant craft the Ascendancy associated with younger species. This thing was brutal, asymmetrical, layered with armor upon armor, each plate scarred, patched, replaced. Engines the size of moons burned a deep, predatory red, but they weren't firing for speed. They were idling. Is it damaged? One admiral asked. No, the AI replied after a long pause. It is waiting. The human voice returned, clearer now. Closer. You are observing a Sentinel-class relic. It is not active. It does not need to be. A murmur spread across the command decks. Relic? This ship alone outweighed half their fleet. And if this was inactive, then what did active look like? The Ascendancy attempted a standard power scan. The results came back incoherent. Energy readings fluctuated between 0 and infinity, as if the ship refused to be measured by conventional reality. The scientists began to panic, not emotionally, but mathematically. Their equations were unraveling. Then the structure spoke again. Not the human voice. The structure itself. A low-frequency resonance vibrated through space, through hulls, through bone. Symbols across its surface ignited, cycling through languages faster than translators could track. But one phrase stabilized long enough to be understood. This is a grave marker. Silence followed. The admirals demanded clarification. The human voice answered, softer now. You crossed into our containment zone. Everything beyond this point exists because we keep it here. Keep what here? As if responding to the thought, the void behind the sentinel rippled again. Shapes moved within it, fractured silhouettes that didn't obey geometry. Some were vast, some were small. All of them felt wrong, like ideas that should never have learned how to exist. Those are not our ships, the humans said. They are the reason you never hear from anyone who comes looking for us. The Ascendancy finally ordered a retreat. Engines flared. Navigation computers plotted escape vectors. None of them resolved. Because human space didn't just surround them anymore. It had closed. Retreat is instinct. Escape is math. And in that moment, the Ascendancy had neither. Their navigation cores screamed errors no species had ever logged before. Vectors folded into themselves. Distances refused to calculate. Every attempted jump spat back the same result. Destination invalid. Space unavailable. How can space be unavailable? An admiral shouted. No one answered. Because the stars outside were no longer fixed points. They drifted, slowly, deliberately, like predators circling prey. Human space wasn't empty. It was curated. The human voice returned, no longer warning. Explaining. You are experiencing boundary compression, it said. Human space is not defined by borders. It is defined by responsibility. Responsibility for what? As if on cue, something brushed against the Ascendancy flagship. Not a collision. A touch. Hull plating screamed as stress fractures raced across alloys rated to survive supernova shockwaves. External cameras caught a glimpse of it. Only a fraction of a fraction, before the feed dissolved into static. The shape had no symmetry, no front, no recognizable propulsion. It looked less like a creature and more like a wound given motion. Reality around it pixelated, then smeared, as if the universe itself was struggling to render the thing. Crew members began to bleed from the nose. Not from pressure, but from vertigo. Their inner ears insisted they were falling in 6 directions at once. What is that? Someone whispered. The answer came from the human, reluctantly. We call them breachers. They arrive from places that do not obey cause and effect. Before us, nothing stopped them. They ate stars. They hollowed galaxies. Physics was optional to them. A pause. Then humanity noticed. Another breacher emerged. Then another. Dozens. Hundreds. They pressed against an invisible boundary, testing it, scraping against something they could not pass. Every contact sent ripples through space like drumbeats. The Ascendancy realized the truth too late. Human space wasn't a territory. It was a wall. The Sentinel ship finally moved. Not toward the Ascendancy, toward the breachers. Weapons unfolded along its hull, crude in shape, terrifying in scale. Not energy cannons. Not missiles. Something else. Something that bent probability until outcomes simply ended. The human voice hardened. We didn't build these ships to conquer, it said. We built them because no one else could survive long enough to fight. The Sentinel fired once. One breacher ceased to exist, not exploded, not destroyed. Its past unraveled. Its future never happened. The space it occupied snapped shut like a healed scar. The Ascendancy watched in awe, then in horror, because the humans weren't winning. They were holding the line. And every second, the pressure increased. The line began to bend. Not break, not shatter, just bend. And that terrified the humans more than any defeat ever had. The Ascendancy could feel it, an unspoken tension in the void, like a cable stretched past its limit. Every breacher strike sent tremors through space itself. The Sentinel-class relic fired again and again, erasing impossibilities with impossible weapons, but for each entity that vanished, 2 more pressed forward. Containment integrity at 87%, the human system announced. 87. To the Ascendancy, that sounded survivable. To the humans, it was a countdown. You're losing, an Ascendancy admiral said, voice shaking despite himself. No, the human replied. We're buying time. The structure, the grave marker, began to activate. Entire sections of it unfolded, revealing layers beneath layers, each etched with symbols representing extinct species. The Ascendancy's linguists recognized some of the names. Great empires, ancient powers, all gone. Every name you see, the human voice said quietly, belongs to a civilization that discovered the breachers too late. They tried to fight, or flee, or ignore them. None of it worked. The breachers slammed into the barrier again. This time, the void screamed. A soundless shriek that cracked viewports and ruptured internal gravity fields. 3 Ascendancy cruisers were torn apart, not by impact, but by contradiction. Their atoms disagreed on where they should be. Panic erupted. The Ascendancy fleet opened fire. Plasma, antimatter, graviton lances, weapons that had ended wars in seconds. The breachers didn't even notice. Their attacks passed through warped space, striking nothing. One breacher turned, if turning was the right word, and looked at the Ascendancy fleet. Every organic mind on those ships felt it at once. A pressure behind the eyes. A suggestion. An invitation to stop existing. Human countermeasures slammed into place instantly. Reality-stabilizing fields enveloped the Ascendancy ships, anchoring them to causality by force. Do not engage, the human barked. You will only draw attention. Too late. The breachers surged. Containment dropped to 74%. The Sentinel ship repositioned itself between the breachers and the Ascendancy fleet. Its engines flared brighter, deeper, burning not fuel but sacrifice. Entire sections of its hull vaporized to reinforce the barrier. Why help us? An admiral demanded. We're not your allies. The human answer came without hesitation. Because if you die here, the breachers learn how to follow. Silence fell. The Ascendancy finally understood. They weren't trapped with humans. They were being protected by them. And protection, in human space, always came at a terrible price. The price came due faster than anyone expected. Containment integrity slipped to 69%, then 68%, then 66% in rapid succession. Each drop wasn't just a number. It was a law of physics quietly failing. Light lagged. Time jittered. Causality stuttered like a broken engine. Human space was straining. We are approaching a decision threshold, the human voice announced. For the first time, something like emotion leaked through. Not fear. Resolve. What threshold? The Ascendancy asked. A pause. Short. Heavy. Whether to let you leave. The words hit harder than any weapon. Let us, an admiral snapped. You said escape vectors were impossible. They are, the human replied. Unless we open one. The grave marker structure rotated, aligning with a region of space that looked thinner, worn, like fabric stretched and patched too many times. The Ascendancy's sensors screamed warnings as power levels spiked beyond safe limits. Opening a path would weaken the wall. The breachers felt it instantly. They surged with renewed fury, hammering the boundary with forms that blurred and multiplied, adapting faster than the Sentinel could erase them. One managed to push partially through, its presence alone causing stars in a nearby system to dim. Containment fell to 59%. If you open a way out, an Ascendancy strategist realized aloud, they'll follow. Yes, the human said. Eventually. Then why do it? Another pause. Longer this time. Because humanity made a promise. No one else dies wondering what happened here. The Sentinel's engines flared brighter than ever. Human ships, dozens of them, previously hidden in folded space, decloaked around the boundary. Not pristine fleets. Wounded ships. Repaired ships. Vessels that should have been scrapped centuries ago. Every one of them moved into position. We will hold, the human voice declared. Long enough for you to run. The Ascendancy fleet began to understand the scale of what they were witnessing. Humans weren't defending territory. They were standing guard over the universe's most violent secret, alone. A rupture opened. Not a jump gate. A wound. Raw. Unstable. Screaming with energy. On the other side lay normal space. Safety. Ignorance. Go. The human commanded. But you, an admiral started. The answer was immediate. We stay. We always stay. As the Ascendancy ships aligned with the escape vector, one breacher broke through fully. Its form snapped into partial reality, and the universe recoiled. Containment plummeted to 51%. The Sentinel turned to face the breach. All human units, the voice said softly, final stand protocol. The Ascendancy fled. And behind them, human space began to burn. The moment the Ascendancy crossed the rupture, reality snapped back into place. Stars locked into position. Time smoothed. Physics exhaled. Behind them, the wound began to close. But not before they saw what humans really did when the universe was at stake. Through the collapsing breach, Sensors caught fragments of the battle. Never the whole thing, never enough to understand, but more than enough to haunt them. Human ships moved with brutal precision, not charging, not retreating, but interlocking. Each vessel anchored the next, forming layers of overlapping containment fields that rewrote causality in localized zones. They weren't fighting the breachers. They were denying them reality. A breacher lunged forward and simply failed to arrive. Its attack vector terminated mid-concept, unraveled by weapons that didn't destroy targets, but invalidated outcomes. Another tried to adapt, shifting form, rewriting itself to bypass the barrier. The humans let it, then collapsed the space it relied on to exist. Casualty projections? A human commander asked. Severe, came the reply. Acceptable. The ascendancy watched in stunned silence. No cries of victory. No cheers. Only grim efficiency. This wasn't a war humans expected to win. It was maintenance. Eternal, grinding maintenance. The grave marker flared brighter, names glowing white-hot before fading. A new line etched itself into the surface, fresh, precise. Ascendancy survived. The breach narrowed further. Just before it closed, the human voice cut through one last time, no longer addressing the ascendancy fleet, addressing history. Remember this, it said. Human space is not forbidden because we are monsters. A breacher struck the barrier, tearing half a sentinel's hull away. The ship didn't retreat. It detonated itself, collapsing a pocket of reality so violently that 3 breachers vanished with it. We are here. The voice continued, strained now. Because someone has to stand where the universe breaks. The rupture sealed. Silence followed. The ascendancy emerged into known space, changed forever. Their fleet limped home carrying data that councils would deny, archives would seal, and admirals would struggle to explain without sounding insane. But one truth could not be erased. Humanity had chosen to live next to oblivion. Not because they were strongest, not because they were fearless, but because when the breachers came, humans were the ones who didn't look away. And somewhere, far beyond any map, human space held. For now, the galaxy didn't believe them. When the ascendancy limped back into concordance space, battered and silent, their arrival triggered celebrations that died the moment the reports began. Admirals spoke of living voids, of physics failing, of humans standing guard at the edge of existence itself. The councils laughed, until the data was reviewed. Star maps showing regions that should exist, but didn't. Sensor logs filled with gaps where reality itself had been removed. Mathematical proofs that ended mid-equation, not unsolved, but invalidated. And one recurring marker, stamped again and again across corrupted files. Containment zone, human space. Emergency summits were called. Older species, ones that remembered the early universe, grew quiet. They recognized the signs, not of war, of custodianship. A single question echoed through every chamber of power. How long have the humans been doing this? The answer came from an unexpected place. A pre-FTL archive species, long ignored, provided a fragmented record. Ancient probes launched before most empires existed. Those probes had reached the edge of what was now human space, and stopped. Not destroyed. Parked. Safely turned around. With a message attached. Primitive. Human. Danger beyond this point. We're handling it. The timestamp was millions of years old. Panic followed. Because that meant humanity hadn't stumbled into this role. They had inherited it. And accepted it. Trade routes were redrawn overnight. Borders retreated. No one wanted to be close. Not out of fear of humans, but fear of what followed them. Entire sectors were quietly evacuated, just in case the wall ever failed. And deep within human space, the wall did weaken. Containment dropped to 44%. Human commanders stood on shattered bridges, surrounded by flickering holograms and casualty lists too long to read. Ships were gone. Names were added to the grave marker faster than systems could engrave them. Status? A commander asked. Stable, came the reply. A lie they all agreed to believe. A junior officer hesitated. If containment collapses. It won't, the commander cut in. But if it does? The human looked out at the void, where shapes pressed and waited, patient as extinction. Then we do what we've always done. Another breacher tested the wall. Another human ship burned itself out to reinforce it. Far away, the ascendancy watched their sensors twitch, just slightly, as something enormous pressed against the universe. And for the first time, the galaxy wondered, what happens when humans can't hold the line anymore? The Ascendancy's warnings spread, but no one believed them fully. Stories of impossible ships, breachers erased before they existed, and human fleets sacrificing themselves to hold reality together sounded like myths, legends for children, or propaganda for frightened species. Yet every fleet commander who had seen the logs felt a shiver that no rational explanation could erase. Meanwhile, deep in human space, preparations began for what no one could predict. Containment had dropped to 35%. Sensors detected breachers probing faster, sharper, more adaptive than ever before. The Sentinel-class vessels, scarred, patched, rebuilt countless times, formed a network, not a fleet, a lattice. Each ship was a node in a chain that bent space itself. They weren't designed to fight. They were designed to exist where fighting was impossible. A human officer checked a holographic display. Hundreds of anomalies detected, all feeding into the containment field. Containment integrity dropping faster, the officer said. The commander didn't look up. Good. Let them push. Let them see what happens when the universe challenges us. A breacher struck the nearest sentinel. The universe shrieked. Space twisted, stars blinked, light itself dissolved in fractions of a second. But the sentinel didn't fall. Its engines pulsed like hearts. Fields of causality wove outward, undoing the attack before it ever happened. Another human voice, calm, resonant, almost tired, spoke over the calm. They test us. We endure. This is why we exist. Then the commander did something that sent a shock through even the most hardened officers. He issued a recall, not of the fleet, but of the idea of retreat. Stand, he said simply. No negotiations. No mercy. Stand. And every human ship did. Every node aligned. Every field stabilized. Every weapon, past, present, and impossible future, held back the chaos. The Ascendancy, watching from beyond the rupture, realized something terrifying. Humanity didn't just defend borders. Humanity redefined them. And no empire, not even theirs, could follow without paying the same cost. Because once you see what humans are willing to endure, every other species suddenly looks small. The breachers hesitated, not because they feared humans. Fear wasn't something they understood, but because humans mattered in ways the universe hadn't accounted for. Every strike that should have ended the Sentinel-class vessels simply unraveled, leaving nothing but rules. New rules. A boundary rewritten in real time by the persistence of a single species. Containment dipped to 27%. The breachers pressed harder. Shapes impossible to describe slashed at the barrier. Their forms bent causality, erased probabilities, and corroded time. Entire systems blinked out briefly, then returned, rearranged. The humans adapted. Ships that were destroyed reappeared in staggered positions, as if the universe itself was being stitched back together. Weapons didn't just fire, they reversed impossibility. Breachers vanished before they could understand what hit them. A strike meant to erase a human vessel only tightened the human hold on reality. A young officer, barely trained, asked the question that everyone feared. Sir, what happens if they break through? The commander looked out at the void. His eyes didn't flinch. They won't, he said. But if they do, then everything we've built, every species that depends on it, will end. And we will be the last thing they see. Then the impossible happened. The breachers coordinated. Not instinctively. Not naturally. They adapted. Something in their logic began to learn around human defenses. Reality stuttered. Systems failed. A sentinel vessel flickered and vanished. No field, no trace, no sensor reading. Containment fell to 20%. The commander didn't panic. Instead, he whispered, almost to himself, an ancient phrase from the human archives, a warning and a vow. We do not yield. We do not hide. We endure. And we survive. From the shadows of folded space, more human vessels appeared. Not pristine. Not perfect. Scarred. Burned. Rebuilt from pieces scattered across centuries. Each one joined the lattice, reinforcing containment, rewriting impossibility into order. The breachers recoiled, not from fear, but from frustration. Patterns they expected to collapse instead hardened. Forces they assumed unstoppable were anchored. The universe itself resisted them. And humanity simply stood. The final battle didn't feel like a battle. It was a negotiation with reality itself, and humans were the only diplomats the universe had ever trusted. Containment integrity stabilized at 15%. The breachers had thrown everything at the wall, everything they were, everything they could imagine. Yet the humans held, not because they were stronger, faster, or more numerous, but because they refused to stop, refused to yield, refused to let the universe break unchecked. The Sentinel-class vessels pulsed with light that wasn't light. Fields rippled, warping probability, rewriting causality, and redefining physics with every synchronized pulse. The breachers struck again and again, but each strike only tightened the human lattice, their impossible weapons shaping impossible outcomes into human order. Then came the calm. The breachers withdrew, not destroyed, not defeated, but halted. They could not breach the line humans held. Every attempt now risked unraveling themselves. They lingered, patient, waiting. But humans would not move. They had learned to endure beyond comprehension. A human commander spoke across the network. This is not victory. This is duty. We endure so the rest may live. Always. The Ascendancy, watching from beyond the rupture, could barely comprehend what they had witnessed. Entire fleets had survived encounters that should have annihilated them. Laws of physics had been bent, but humans had bent them without breaking. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy understood the truth. Human space was not a place. It was a promise that when the universe threatens existence itself, humans will stand. And in that standing, they define what it means to be human, resilient, relentless, and impossibly brave. The Ascendancy never forgot the transmission that followed them home. You may return to your stars. But remember, some spaces are meant to be guarded, not conquered. And some species are meant to endure where all others fail. The galaxy would whisper their name for eons. And somewhere, beyond the known maps, human space waited. Waiting, watching, enduring. The end.